Hello, scholars, and welcome back. It's week 4 of POL450 Research Methods for Political Science. I hope that we all had a successful week 3. As we stated earlier in this course, week 3 is probably the most difficult week, workload-wise, um, conceptually, and one of the hardest ones to navigate because last week we tried to attempt to formulate our first research question. And I hope by this point we realize, and through the reading and through your understanding of just a little that we've gone through in this course, that once we have a firm foundation of a good, solid research question, the remainder of this class or the remainder of our research perspective has a tendency to fall into place. So it's Sunday evening, and I know that a lot of you are diligently trying to get your research questions together. So the chances are by the time that you listen to this video, you have already submitted your research questions. And I'll tell you this much, when it comes to your research questions, oftentimes they need to be rewrote and revised and just a little more thought that goes into them. So I look forward to reading all your research questions, but don't feel bad if there is some evaluation, some critique that results in additional work, because it's all based upon that fact that if we can fine tune our research question, we will be looking very well as we move forward in this course. But with that being said, let's look at week 4 at our agenda and what we have going. So for this week, we have 2 chapters of text that we're going to be reading through, and it's chapter 5 and chapter 6. In chapter 5, it's titled Effectively Distilling Your Argument, the Thesis, Model, and Hypothesis. And remember that for many of us, our research question has the potential to be a hypothesis, where you are either you're going to make some sort of statement, and then you're going to try to prove if that statement is in fact true, or if it is not true. So for some of you, you might get feedback where this would be your research question will lend itself well to a hypothesis, and it goes into a lot of good detail on how that concept works, and that's in chapter 5. And then in chapter 6, it's revising and editing your work, the research, writing, thinking spiral, or the research, writing, thinking spiral. And that's one of the things that you're going to probably realize, that your research question, and even different portions, maybe your purpose statement or your problem statement, as you start building your study, oftentimes these get changed. And when I say change, they might just get tweaked slightly. So don't be surprised if as you move forward, you might find that the wording, the descriptive, those words that you try to operationalize, you have the ability, and it is entirely okay, and oftentimes actually we put emphasis that we should be doing this, is that as you move through your study, it is okay to make small revisions, to change things, to change wording, and don't think there's anything wrong with that. And those are the 2 chapters that are really addressed this week. And then we have some PowerPoint lectures. In the weekly agenda, we're still listing that annotated bibliography research, because that's one of those things that we need to be doing each week. Whereas any book that you're looking at, anything that you're finding to operationalize your variables, just start writing down all those references, and remember that all those add up to being your annotated bibliography. And that is the literature review for our prospectus, and that's chapter 2. And then we have 3 deliverables this week. Written assignment 4, application exercise 4, and week 4 discussion board. And I'll go into each one of those more in detail. But let's look at our PowerPoint lectures. For this week, our PowerPoint lecture is the Introduction to Statistics, Validity, and Reliability. And I will make a point to narrate this PowerPoint, because this is one of the ones that is very important, because there's some key terms in there, and I think it really pulls together this kind of concept of statistics and measurement and numbers. And I think once you get a good concept of that, this will really help as we move forward, when we start thinking about what type of data am I actually going to use for this course. So I'll narrate this, and by probably tomorrow you'll have a narrated version of this PowerPoint, which will really help you navigate your way through. Then we have written exercise number 4, research questions and measurement. So, like always, Sunday at 11:59, and that's going to be November 24th, 25 points possible. And here are the directions. Continue to work on refining your research question, the variables suggested by your question, and how you will measure or operationalize the variables. I have posted a sample based on the example I gave in last week's assignment. By the end of this week, you should have your questions finalized, as well as a statement of the variables and their operationalization. You will need to submit this assignment more than once to get everything, or you may need to submit this assignment more than once just to get everything right. And then we have your submission. It needs to have incorporate all parts, and then grammar, 15 points and 10 points. And you'll see that's kind of standardized. So let's look at this doc. So as we look at this doc, and you remember this, or this document that I've attached, remember this is building off of what we talked about last week. So operationalizing my variables. In last week's assignment, I offered the following as my first attempt at a research question. Have the residents of Riverside County, California changed their water usage habits over the last year? Or have they chosen not to change their usage over the same period of time? And what reasons have they given for their decision? So this week we want to start tweaking that question and determine how I might measure my variables. So as we look through this, the first thing that we're going to need to understand is, what is drought? What is this question? Have they changed their water usage over the last year? What is drought? So I will define drought given by what the National Weather Service considers to be a drought. And then we have that question, have residents in Riverside County, California changed their water usage habits? And what I have here is, and I'll just explain it to you before I read it to you. If I were to ask you, how much water do you use? Many of you wouldn't be able to give me a gallonage or cubic acre or acres of water that you might use. You might say that I use a lot, or I use a little, or I have a really high water bill, or I have a very low water bill. But to give me an exact gallonage of what, that would be very hard for me to ask, because very few of us actually would know that information. So if I were to ask you a quantity, that is definitely a quantifiable variable, and data could be gathered that is interval ratio, and we'll find out those words in the PowerPoint this week. However, I don't believe most people are aware of exactly how much water they'll be used, even though it is listed on their monthly bill. I will use this ordinal level data, and ordinal is just an order of any terms put together, to determine if people believe they are using less water, more water, or no change. And that's where you see the order. We would have less on the far left, no change in the middle, or more on the right. And that would be something that I could ask someone, and they might actually have an understanding. Since the drought, do you feel that you're using less water, more water, or things haven't changed? And I believe that someone could actually express that. And what's interesting about that is, although it's still quantifiable data, I can put it into with ordinal level, and I could actually measure it just based upon those concepts of less, more, or no. And then we go into the second part of that research question. What are the reasons for changing or not changing water usage? If people have not changed or have changed or not changed or haven't, I will ask them, this is a qualitative data and cannot be quantified, but it will give important information on the people's perspective of the drought and its impact to the area. So let's explain that a little bit more. If I were to ask you, why is the reason that you've either changed or not changed? And then what the people respond, obviously that's going to be what we call qualitative data. It's something that we can't measure with a number. So if they say, I've reduced water because it's better for the environment. I've reduced water because, man, water's expensive nowadays, and I don't want to get one of those huge bills. Maybe it's philosophical, maybe it is political based, maybe it's driven strictly because they want to do something good for the environment. It could be economical. But what I would do is I would group everybody's responses into some sort of coding. And the coding would be like, okay, there's so, like, if they say that it's money based, I'm going to call that economical. And if they say that it is, it's because everybody in their neighborhood, and I feel like as a good steward of the neighborhood, I got to abide by the laws, I might say that's cultural. And if it's something that it's because it's good for the environment, I might combine those all into environmental. And that's what coding is, and that's what you do with qualitative data. You put things together based upon their responses things that you could typically not measure with a number value. You put those together, code them in such a manner, and then you do something with that coding. Normally there's some sort of statistical analysis we'll do to see if there's some sort of significance, what sort of ratios, what kind of odds that those group, what sort of percentages. So think of this document when we start operationalizing, and you could see how we picked apart every sentence. Have the residents of Riverside County. Pretty straightforward. That doesn't need a whole lot of operationalizing. Change their water usage. Man, that word changed. That's a tough one. Um, that would be something that needs operationalization. Or have they chosen not to change, and what reasons do they give for their decisions? And the reasons, as you can see, those are that next thing that we need to operationalize. So there you go. I hope that helps you navigate through our week 4 written assignment. Our next assignment that we have is going to be our application exercise. And remember your application exercise, it's a quiz based. So the application exercise is based on the basic terminology and techniques of descriptive statistics. You'll find all these answers in the PowerPoint lecture. There is no time limit on the quiz, but once it is open, it must be completed. Do not try to save your work and come back to it later. And the quiz may be repeated one time for a higher score if you wish. So utilize time management. Do that quiz in one sitting and review it, and learn from it, and then you can take it a second time if you want to improve your grades. So application exercise, once again, due Sunday by 11:59, and it's pretty straightforward. And then finally, we have a discussion board this week. Week 4 discussion board. What I'm asking is discuss your topic and your research with your fellow students. How is the search for relevant literature going? What interesting or surprising things have you discovered in your search for information? In addition to posting information on your own topic, you need to respond to at least 2 students' posts with feedback and encouragement or insight on their topics. So remember, discussion boards replace the dialogue that we would have within the classroom. And since this is an entirely online class, we don't have a classroom. So we need to interact throughout this discussion board. So many of you are new to the concepts of research. So it would help if you got to hear or to read about other people's research. So I want you to introduce your topic. I want you to discuss your topic. I want you to discuss the research that you're doing for your topic, and especially when it comes to the literature review, where you're finding information, how you're finding it, and how it's relevant. Share that information in your first discussion board post. It needs to be at least 250 words in my eyes, in order to hit all the information. And then you need to follow up with at least 2 responses to fellow students. And once again, I don't want to see good. I don't want to see thank you for sharing. I don't want to read I agree with. I want you to add to the dialogue. There needs to be some substance to these answers in order to get full credit. So that is our week 4 discussion board. Once again, due 11:59 on Sunday. So there you have it, week 4. Fairly straightforward. We're building off of week 3. We're fine-tuning that research question. We're adding some new elements. We're filling up those pieces of our chapter 1. We have an application exercise that gives us a little bit of introduction into statistical analysis, especially descriptive statistics. And we have a discussion board where we can share what we're doing with our fellow colleagues in this class so we can get a better understanding of how this process works. So thank you for listening to this video. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, get a hold of me via email and we'll get those all solved. Remember that we all need to adhere to the strict deadlines. And if by any reason you have any comments, concerns, questions, issues that arise during this week, get a hold of me as soon as possible. Remember, I don't believe there is a problem that we can't solve as long as we communicate. So I'll keep you all in my thoughts and prayers this week as we diligently move through week 4. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to when we can talk again. Bye for now.